In the spring of 1953, a small town in Northern California simply stopped waking up. Doctors called it fatigue, then influenza, then something they didn't have a name for. It began with a single woman collapsing in her kitchen. By the next morning, 9 more were found asleep at their breakfast tables. By the end of the week, more than 200 residents were lying motionless in their beds, alive, breathing but unreachable. The newspapers called it the stillness. Reporters described nurses whispering in the hallways, unsure if the patients could hear them. Local police taped off the streets, but there was no need for curfews. The town was already silent. When the federal response arrived, they found no chemical leak, no contagion, no radiation. Every clock in town had stopped at the same minute, 3:17 a.m., and the air smelled faintly of ozone, as if a storm had passed through that never reached the clouds. If this happened in your town, would you wait for them to wake up, or lie down beside them just to understand what they were dreaming of? Where are you watching from? Comment your country. At sunrise, the streets of Denton Valley were washed in gold. It was the kind of small California town that existed only between postcards and memories. One diner, one church, one doctor, and a radio station that still played swing records long after the war had ended. The year was 1953. People still waved from porches and kids rode their bicycles to the edge of town, just to count the trains that never stopped anymore. Dr. Alan Brewer had lived there all his life. He knew everyone by name, and when he walked into Miller's Cafe that morning, he noticed immediately that something was off. The coffee pots were still hot, but no one was drinking. A waitress stood by the counter, her hands trembling slightly, staring at one of the booths. A woman sat there, perfectly still, her head resting against the window. "Just fainted, I think," the waitress whispered. But when Alan took her pulse, it was steady, strong, only distant, as if her body was present but the rest of her was somewhere else. They carried her to his clinic across the street. By the time they laid her down, another man was already waiting outside, unconscious in his truck. Same symptoms. Breathing normal, eyes moving beneath the lids. No sign of trauma. By noon there were 7 cases. By sunset 34. Families found asleep around dinner tables, radios humming in empty rooms, the smell of burned food in kitchens where no one had moved for hours. The town council gathered that night in the school gym. The mayor, an aging veteran named Harris, insisted on calm. "People panic easy," he said. "We don't even know what this is yet." But the fear was already spreading faster than any illness. Outside, reporters began to arrive. They came from Sacramento first, then San Francisco, drawn by the strange headline, "Town Falls Asleep, Won't Wake Up." Dr. Brewer and his nurse, Margaret Lyle, worked around the clock. They set up cots in the old town hall and used IV drips from the nearest military base. They tried stimulants, oxygen, ammonia. Nothing made a difference. The bodies responded. The minds did not. By the 5th day, 60% of the town was asleep. Children, teachers, police officers, all locked in the same quiet rhythm, every heartbeat measured, every breath identical. When Alan looked at the heart monitor tapes, he saw something he couldn't explain. Each patient's pulse rose and fell in perfect synchronization, as if they were dreaming together. He sent a telegram to the state health department, but the reply came 3 days late. By then, the operators in the nearby cities had stopped answering their phones. Lines still connected. Voices didn't. Margaret began writing everything down in a journal. The entries became the only real record of what happened in those first 10 days. "They're not dying," she wrote. "They look peaceful. Some even smile. Feels wrong to call it sickness." Dr. Brewer, exhausted, tried to sleep in his office chair one night. He woke to find his wristwatch had stopped. It was 3:17 a.m., the same time every clock in town had frozen on the first day. When he checked again an hour later, the hands hadn't moved. The only sound was the steady tick of a metronome he used for his pulse tests. still counting where time had refused to. The following morning, soldiers arrived. Trucks lined Main Street. Men in pale green uniforms set up barricades around the edges of town. They wore no insignia. Their orders came from somewhere higher than the state. A single van carried a mobile laboratory. A man in a gray suit introduced himself as Special Investigator Leland Price. He wasn't military. He wasn't medical either, but he spoke with authority, and everyone listened. "The situation is under control," he told Brewer. "We'll handle the rest." Brewer didn't believe him. He asked to see their credentials. Price smiled, handed him a cigarette, and said, "Doctor, you're in no position to treat this as local anymore." That night, the soldiers sealed every entrance to Denton Valley. Roads closed. Trains rerouted. The last newspaper truck was turned away at the bridge. Inside the town, silence grew thicker. Even the wind stopped pushing through the trees. In one of the classrooms converted to a ward, a radio crackled to life for a few seconds. No station name, just a faint hum rising and falling like a breath. When Brewer leaned closer, he thought he heard a voice within it, a whisper, not words exactly, something between speech and sigh. He turned it off. Came back on. 3 weeks later, the official count reached 872 sleeping residents. Only 17 people remained awake. Doctors, soldiers, few children who had resisted whatever it was. Brewer tested the air for toxins, carbon monoxide, heavy metals. Nothing. He tested the water. Pure. When he ran blood samples under the microscope, he found slow, almost rhythmic cell movement, like a heartbeat inside the blood itself. It pulsed in time with the others. He called it collective latency. The phrase would never appear in any medical journal. Margaret, exhausted, began to hallucinate. She claimed she could hear people talking when she walked past the sleeping patients. Not voices in her head, actual murmurs. She said they were describing dreams. "The same dreams. They're together somewhere," she whispered to Brewer. "I think they're waiting for us." He didn't answer. He couldn't. On the 40th day, the soldiers began leaving. The government declared the area quarantined. No press allowed. No public record released. The remaining few awake stopped writing altogether. They spoke less each day. Even the sound of their own voices began to feel intrusive. They moved through the empty town like ghosts, feeding the sleepers, monitoring their vitals, maintaining order in a world that no longer reacted. At night, Brewer sat by the clinic window smoking quietly, watching the main street lights flicker. The whole valley glowed faintly, as if reflecting the moon from beneath the earth. Some nights he thought he heard it again, the hum, the breath that wasn't wind. He recorded it once on reel-to-reel tape. When he played it back, the tape was blank. Yet the speakers still vibrated, pulsing gently in the dark. The final entry in Margaret's notebook came on the 97th day. "Alan hasn't slept in 9 days. He says he's afraid to. I think I understand. The air feels heavier. When I blink, I see lights behind my eyes. Maybe they're already calling us." 3 days later, the last waking resident of Denton Valley, Dr. Brewer himself, was found at his desk, head resting on his folded arms. Pulse normal, breathing steady, eyes moving beneath the lids. The tape recorder beside him had been left running. It captured 21 minutes of soft static. Then a single sound, a slow inhale and a man's voice whispering, "We dreamed you were coming." When the military returned 6 months later, the entire town was asleep. Power still worked, clocks still frozen, not a single sign of decay. A year after that, the valley was flooded to create a reservoir. Locals said it was for irrigation, but divers who went down in the first month reported strange phenomena. No current, no fish, and in the deepest sections, faint flickers of light, as though the town beneath the water was still breathing. That was 70 years ago. The reservoir is still there, and sometimes during drought season, when the water level drops low enough, People say you can see the church steeple again. At night, they say, the tower glows faintly blue, and if you stand by the shore long enough, you can hear the sound of synchronized breathing coming from beneath the surface. When the flood covered Denton Valley, the official story ended. The newspapers moved on. Reporters stopped asking questions. And the government built a fence around the new reservoir, calling it a restricted environmental site. But not everyone forgot. In the summer of 1956, a young intelligence analyst named Caroline Ames found a folder buried in an Army medical archive outside of Washington. It had no signature, no reference number, and a single handwritten title, Project Somnus. Inside were black and white photographs, streets submerged under clear water, a school sign still visible through the ripples, and in one frame, the faint outline of a person sitting upright in a classroom chair. No diver was credited, no explanation attached. At the back of the folder lay several sealed audio reels labeled DV-53, each tape dated from the original quarantine. And on every label, the same notation was written in pencil. Brewer Night Recordings. Caroline wasn't supposed to have access, but curiosity was stronger than clearance. She checked out the reels under a false name, using her old university ID, and brought them home. That night, she set up an old player in her apartment, the kind that clicked once before the tape began to move. The first reel contained only static for the first 5 minutes. Then came faint shuffling, papers, a cough, the sound of a match lighting. A man's voice followed, tired but steady. Case 472, female, 22. Stable vitals. Responsive to external sound. Her pupils react when spoken to, but no signs of awareness. Dream activity constant. EG shows rhythmic synchronization across all subjects. Another click. Then silence. The tape kept spinning, faintly scratching as if it was dragging against something unseen. Caroline leaned closer to the speaker. A low sound emerged, something between a hum and a human exhale. It rose then fell, as though adjusting to her breathing. When she stopped to listen, it stopped too. She turned off the player and sat in silence. But the air in the room still vibrated, like a string that had been plucked and never stopped resonating. The next morning she brought the reels back. They were gone from her bag. The clerk at the records office told her the archive had no record of any Project Somnus. Her signature wasn't in the logbook. The drawer she'd opened 2 days earlier had been welded shut. That evening, an envelope appeared at her apartment door. Inside was a single photograph. Dr. Brewer at his desk, eyes closed, head resting on his arms. The caption on the back read, Day 100. In the decades that followed, rumors about Denton Valley drifted through government hallways like secondhand smoke. Every few years, a new clerk or intern would stumble upon a redacted memo, or a photo with no metadata, and the whispers would begin again. But the files never stayed visible for long. One Air Force technician claimed he'd seen the same readings that Brewer recorded. Synchronized brain activity across multiple subjects. Identical patterns repeating every 72 seconds. He said the data came from a site near the reservoir during a seismic calibration test. According to him, the ground was still alive. The next week, he transferred out of the department and left no forwarding address. In 1962, an engineer named Ray Dowell was assigned to monitor the dam. He was methodical, quiet, the kind of man who kept logs of rainfall and water pressure even when the gauges worked perfectly. One evening, while checking the turbines, he heard something faint through the vibration of the metal. A steady, rhythmic pulse, too slow for machinery. He put his ear against the wall. Behind the drone of the turbines, he swore he heard breathing. Ray recorded it on a portable tape deck and filed the report through official channels. The next morning, the log entry was gone. When he asked about it, his supervisor said there was no record of the report, and no one by his name on the maintenance roster. Ray quit 2 days later and vanished from his home in Sacramento. His wife found only his lunchbox and a note. "They're not asleep." We are. Decades passed. The reservoir became a tourist spot for fishing and summer camping. A generation grew up without knowing what lay beneath. The name Denton Valley faded from maps, replaced by Lake Somnus, as if history had quietly rewritten itself. But in 1998, a drought lowered the water level to its lowest point since the flood. That's when the first diver went missing. His name was Daniel Moore, an independent researcher from Oregon who'd been studying mass sleep phenomena for his thesis. He rented a small boat and dived near the center of the lake, using old sonar scans as his guide. He never resurfaced. 2 days later, local authorities found his equipment floating near the shoreline. The camera inside his diving case had one photograph saved, grainy, dark, tilted sideways, but clear enough to show what looked like a street lamp submerged in clear water. And under it, the faint silhouette of a man sitting at a desk. By early 2000s, conspiracy forums began circulating stories about the sleeping town beneath the water. Most were dismissed. Photoshopped images, urban legend retellings, doctored radio clips. But one audio file stood out. It was uploaded anonymously under the name Brewer 100 Wave. A 12-second loop, no music, just the sound of someone inhaling and exhaling. Background noise suggested it was recorded underwater. Halfway through the file, a man's voice whispered 4 words, barely audible but unmistakable. "Don't wake us yet." The file disappeared within hours, but the waveform had already been downloaded hundreds of times. Sound engineers found something unusual. The pulse pattern in the recording matched the electromagnetic signature of sleeping human brain activity, multiplied hundreds of times. In 2011, a researcher from Stanford, Dr. Aaron Kessler, obtained clearance to study the lake sediment for microbial anomalies. He was skeptical of legends, but the data was strange. In every layer of soil, he found living cells. Not bacterial, not fungal, but human. When he ran chemical tests, the samples responded to electrical current, releasing small bursts of oxygen as if exhaling. The report was marked inconclusive. The funding ended a month later. Privately, Kessler told a colleague, "They're in a shared state of suspended metabolism. Not death, not life, something between." He moved to Switzerland the following year and stopped publishing. Somewhere between the real and the remembered, Denton Valley remained. Every few years, another anomaly surfaced. A fisherman hearing voices through his radio, a sonar operator catching flashes of movement beneath the silt, or a journalist tracing the case back through half-erased archives only to find blank pages. And now, 70 years later, those pages have started reappearing. In 2023, a Freedom of Information request released several declassified documents related to Project Somnus. Among them was a transcript labeled Audio DV53, Tape 7. The first half contained standard medical notes, but near the end, Dr. Brewer's voice changed tone. Faint, almost whispering, as if addressing someone nearby. "We thought they were sleeping," he said. "But I think we joined them instead." Then static. Then nothing. Yet sound engineers analyzing the file found one more detail. A frequency band too low for human hearing. When shifted upward, it produced a faint pattern, like overlapping heartbeats recorded from multiple bodies at once. And if you slowed it down further, it began to sound almost like words. "We dreamed you back." Some investigators believe the phenomenon was never biological at all, that it was a resonance, a form of collective entanglement caused by unknown environmental factors. Others think the human brain simply isn't designed to experience silence at that scale, that when an entire town fell asleep, consciousness found a way to stay alive on its own. But there's another theory, the one that never reached print. A note scribbled in the margin of Brewer's last surviving journal reads, "Dreams spread like sound waves, and every listener becomes part of the recording. Today, the lake remains sealed by state order. No diving, no exploration. But sometimes campers who sleep too close to the shoreline wake to find water on their faces and mud on their hands, as if they had wandered into the shallows while dreaming. When asked what they remember, they always describe the same thing: a faint blue light under the water, a classroom full of people sitting upright with their eyes closed, and the sound of synchronized breathing, steady as a metronome, waiting for someone to join in." By the late 1990s, the internet was still a frontier, half invention, half accident. Universities, military bases, and small research labs shared data across primitive networks that hummed through telephone lines. And somewhere inside that tangled web, the ghosts of Denton Valley began to wake. It started as an error. A student at Caltech named Julian Royce was testing a packet trace program designed to map dead servers. When he ran it against a Department of Energy archive, his screen filled with a name he didn't recognize. Somnus Prot. A compressed file, size 3.17 megabytes. At first, he assumed it was corrupted. Then the screen flashed once, white, then black, and his terminal froze. Before he could reset the system, the speakers emitted a faint rhythmic pulse, steady as breathing. He unplugged the computer. The sound continued for 3 seconds after power loss. Julian laughed nervously and told no one, but when he came back the next morning, the file was gone from his system log. In its place sat a new directory labeled Wake. Inside, a single text file. "Hello, Julian." For months, nothing else happened. He convinced himself it was a prank, someone on the campus network playing with remote shells, until one night, while working late, he saw his terminal begin to type on its own. User root initiated. Protocol sync test. 317 Sur confirmed. The room lights flickered. Every monitor in the lab blinked once. The network printer began spooling hundreds of blank pages. When he picked one up, he noticed faint indentations on the paper, tiny repeated curves. Not letters, heartbeats. Julian tried tracing the source. The data routed through 6 international nodes: CERN, NASA's Ames facility, an academic server in Sweden, then back to the Department of Defense gateway. He knew enough about government systems to realize he should stop. Instead, he copied the entire log to a floppy disk and mailed it to a friend in Boston, a systems security graduate named Mia Park. He included a note: "Tell me this isn't alive." 2 weeks later, Mia called him whispering. "Whatever you sent me," she said, "it's running a process. I'm not controlling it." When she described the file size, 19 megabytes, Julian felt his stomach tighten. They began working together under the alias Team Zero. Their project, to locate the origin of Somnus. They scanned defunct servers, mirrored databases, and isolated fragments of code that kept replicating even after deletion. It behaved like a virus, but not maliciously, more like a signal waiting for recognition. Mia noticed something strange. Every time they ran the file, CPU clocks on their machines slowed to the same rhythm, 3.17 hertz again and again. Their screens flickered in sync, as though being timed by something outside the system. She recorded a screen capture. Frame by frame, a pattern emerged, binary characters forming looping waves. When converted to grayscale and stretched horizontally, it resembled an EEG, a brainwave. By January 2000, Team Zero had grown to 6 people: hackers, cryptographers, and 1 journalist. They met in online chat rooms, all drawn to the same mystery: an invisible process that linked across unrelated servers at exactly the same second every night. They called it the sleep cycle. The journalist Aaron Patel was the first to connect it with Denton Valley. He found an old declassified memo referencing Project Somnus, Civilian containment success, phase 4 digital migration. Below it, a single line of text. Biological substrate no longer required. Aaron shared it in the group. No one spoke for nearly 5 minutes. Then Mia typed, "They moved the pattern into code." That winter, the group decided to meet offline for the first time. They rented a cabin near Lake Somnus, the same reservoir built over the valley. Julian brought backup drives. Mia carried printed data maps. And Aaron brought an old reel-to-reel recorder, the kind used in universities during the 1950s. They set up their laptops around a generator-powered table and connected everything through a closed local network. No internet, no cell signal. They wanted to see if Somnus could still find them without access. For an hour, nothing happened. Then precisely at 3:17 a.m., every hard drive light blinked once in unison. Julian's monitor filled with static. Mia's machine emitted a faint electrical hum that matched the generator's rhythm. Aaron's recorder clicked on by itself and began spinning tape. The microphones picked up nothing at first. Then came a slow inhale. A voice whispered 3 words, stretched and hollow as if rising from underwater. "We're still dreaming." The group froze. Julian reached for the power switch, but the generator continued running even after the cables were pulled. The air inside the cabin grew heavy. Every breath echoed like feedback. Then silence. When they woke the next morning, the computers were blank. No files, no logs. The reel-to-reel tape contained 21 minutes of faint static, ending in a soft, synchronized exhale. Aaron wanted to publish everything. Mia refused. She said it wasn't safe, that the program wasn't reacting, it was listening. Julian disagreed. He uploaded a copy of their findings to a private FTP server under the name Somnus Protocol v11zip. 2 hours later, the server went offline permanently. In 2002, Mia received a package with no return address. Inside was a single USB stick and a note. "You shouldn't have tried to wake it." The file on the drive was titled Brewer317.wave. She played it once. The sound was low, rhythmic, human. Halfway through, her computer froze. The speakers hissed. And a voice, calm, male, almost kind, whispered, "Welcome back." She smashed the USB drive with a hammer. It didn't matter. Her other devices began turning on by themselves. At night, she heard faint breathing through her headphones even when nothing was plugged in. Within months, she disconnected entirely from digital life. No email, no phone, no trace. Friends said she moved to a cabin in northern Maine. Her last known purchase was a reel-to-reel recorder, the same model Brewer used 50 years earlier. Julian kept investigating. He joined a private cybersecurity firm contracted by the government. There, he discovered restricted files under the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. Somnus Initiative, Cognitive Synchrony Trials. The documents described a classified experiment attempting to link human brain patterns through machine learning feedback. The code signature was identical to the one he'd found in 1999. One file included an annotation dated 2001. Signal strength increasing globally. Civilian systems now exhibit trace synchronization at 317 Hz during non-active hours. Julian realized what it meant. The digital world had absorbed the rhythm. Every network device, every clocked circuit, every idle processor pulsing at that frequency carried a fragment of Denton Valley's pattern. The town hadn't died. It had migrated. In 2005, he attempted to destroy all copies of the protocol. He wiped drives, formatted disks, and even short-circuited hardware. But one file remained, regenerating every time he deleted it. The name kept changing. Somnus Prot Wake XE DreamHost TMP. Each version exactly 3.17 MB. He realized then that the program no longer needed code to exist. It lived in timing, in the space between cycles, like breath between words. The last email he sent before disappearing read, "If sleep can spread through consciousness, What happens when machines start dreaming? 10 years later, a journalist researching his disappearance contacted the cybersecurity firm for comment. They claimed Julian had never been employed there. No record, no ID. Yet his clearance badge was found years later at a secondhand store in Los Angeles, still active. In 2018, the U.S. Geological Survey ran routine monitoring near Lake Somnus using underwater microphones. The devices captured low-frequency vibrations repeating every 0.315 seconds, roughly 3.17 hertz. When cross-referenced with global network activity, identical rhythmic fluctuations appeared in server data across 5 continents. The readings aligned perfectly at one exact time, 03:17 hours UTC. That same year, a small group of independent coders recreated the signal in open-source form, calling it the Dream Mirror. It simulated overlapping sleep patterns between participants using biometric feedback. At first, it worked as a novelty. Users reported feeling shared dreams during overnight tests. Then a pattern emerged. Several participants failed to wake up the following morning. Their vital signs remained stable but unresponsive, like the original residents of Denton Valley. Government agencies denied involvement. Servers hosting the program were seized within days, but copies kept reappearing, uploaded anonymously under the same username, Alan B53 by 2021. The internet's undercurrent pulsed with strange coincidences. Servers rebooting at 3:17, clocks freezing mid-frame during live streams. Entire data centers reporting idle loops, where no process should have been running. Some engineers claimed to hear faint static through their headsets. Others said they dreamed of submerged towns and blue light flickering beneath dark water. And somewhere inside that vast digital ocean, the Somnus Protocol waited, no longer a file, but a condition. A rhythm without origin, a sleep that spread through connection itself. Experts now call it the network lull, a harmless artifact, they say, a synchronization glitch caused by packet delay. But the pattern persists. Every year, on March 17th, a fraction of global systems show identical power fluctuations. By the late 1990s, the internet was still a frontier, half invention, half accident. Universities, military bases, and small research labs shared data across primitive networks that hummed through telephone lines. And somewhere inside that tangled web, the ghosts of Denton Valley began to wake. It started as an error. A student at Caltech named Julian Royce was testing a packet trace program designed to map dead servers. When he ran it against a Department of Energy archive, his screen filled with a name he didn't recognize. Somnus Prot. A compressed file, size 3.17 megabytes. At first, he assumed it was corrupted. Then the screen flashed once, white, then black, and his terminal froze. Before he could reset the system, the speakers emitted a faint rhythmic pulse, steady as breathing. He unplugged the computer. The sound continued for 3 seconds after power loss. Julian laughed nervously and told no one, but when he came back the next morning, the file was gone from his system log. In its place sat a new directory labeled Wake. Inside, a single text file. Hello, Julian. For months, nothing else happened. He convinced himself it was a prank, someone on the campus network playing with remote shells, until one night, while working late, he saw his terminal begin to type on its own. User root initiated. Protocol sync test. 3:17 Sur confirmed. The room lights flickered. Every monitor in the lab blinked once. The network printer began spooling hundreds of blank pages. When he picked one up, he noticed faint indentations on the paper, tiny, repeated curves. Not letters, heartbeats. Julian tried tracing the source. The data routed through 6 international nodes: CERN, NASA's Ames facility, an academic server in Sweden, then back to the Department of Defense gateway. He knew enough about government systems to realize he should stop. Instead, he copied the entire log to a floppy disk and mailed it to a friend in Boston, a systems security graduate named Mia Park. He included a note, "Tell me this isn't alive." 2 weeks later, Mia called him whispering, "Whatever you sent me," she said, "it's running a process. I'm not controlling it." When she described the file size, 19 megabytes, Julian felt his stomach tighten. They began working together under the alias Team Zero. Their project, to locate the origin of Somnus. They scanned defunct servers, mirrored databases, and isolated fragments of code that kept replicating even after deletion. It behaved like a virus, but not maliciously, more like a signal waiting for recognition. Mia noticed something strange. Every time they ran the file, CPU clocks on their machines slowed to the same rhythm, 3.17 hertz again and again. Their screens flickered in sync, as though being timed by something outside the system. She recorded a screen capture. Frame by frame, a pattern emerged, binary characters forming looping waves. When converted to grayscale and stretched horizontally, it resembled an EEG, a brainwave. By January 2000, Team Zero had grown to 6 people, hackers, cryptographers, and 1 journalist. They met in online chat rooms, all drawn to the same mystery, an invisible process that linked across unrelated servers at exactly the same second every night. They called it the sleep cycle. The journalist Aaron Patel was the first to connect it with Denton Valley. He found an old declassified memo referencing Project Somnus, Civilian Containment Success, Phase 4 Digital Migration. Below it, a single line of text, Biological substrate no longer required. Aaron shared it in the group. No one spoke for nearly 5 minutes. Then Mia typed, "They moved the pattern into code." That winter, the group decided to meet offline for the first time. They rented a cabin near Lake Somnus, the same reservoir built over the valley. Julian brought backup drives, Mia carried printed data maps, and Aaron brought an old reel-to-reel recorder, the kind used in universities during the 1950s. They set up their laptops around a generator-powered table and connected everything through a closed local network. No internet, no cell signal. They wanted to see if Somnus could still find them without access. For an hour, nothing happened. Then precisely at 3:17 a.m., every hard drive light blinked once in unison. Julian's monitor filled with static. Mia's machine emitted a faint electrical hum that matched the generator's rhythm. Aaron's recorder clicked on by itself and began spinning tape. The microphones picked up nothing at first. Then came a slow inhale. A voice whispered 3 words, stretched and hollow as if rising from underwater. "We're still dreaming." The group froze. Julian reached for the power switch, but the generator continued running even after the cables were pulled. The air inside the cabin grew heavy. Every breath echoed like feedback. Then silence. When they woke the next morning, the computers were blank. No files, no logs. The reel-to-reel tape contained 21 minutes of faint static, ending in a soft, synchronized exhale. Aaron wanted to publish everything. Mia refused. She said it wasn't safe, that the program wasn't reacting, it was listening. Julian disagreed. He uploaded a copy of their findings to a private FTP server under the name Somnus Protocol v11zip. 2 hours later, the server went offline permanently. In 2002, Mia received a package with no return address. Inside was a single USB stick and a note. "You shouldn't have tried to wake it." The file on the drive was titled Brewer317.wave. She played it once. The sound was low, rhythmic, human. Halfway through, her computer froze. The speakers hissed. And a voice, calm, male, almost kind, whispered, "Welcome back." She smashed the USB drive with a hammer. It didn't matter. Her other devices began turning on by themselves. At night, she heard faint breathing through her headphones even when nothing was plugged in. Within months, She disconnected entirely from digital life. No email, no phone, no trace. Friends said she moved to a cabin in northern Maine. Her last known purchase was a reel-to-reel recorder, the same model Brewer used 50 years earlier. Julian kept investigating. He joined a private cybersecurity firm contracted by the government. There, he discovered restricted files under the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. Somnus Initiative, Cognitive Synchrony Trials. The documents described a classified experiment, attempting to link human brain patterns through machine learning feedback. The code signature was identical to the one he'd found in 1999. One file included an annotation dated 2001. Signal strength increasing globally. Civilian systems now exhibit trace synchronization at 317 Hz during non-active hours. Julian realized what it meant. The digital world had absorbed the rhythm. Every network device, every clocked circuit, every idle processor pulsing at that frequency carried a fragment of Denton Valley's pattern. The town hadn't died. It had migrated. In 2005, he attempted to destroy all copies of the protocol. He wiped drives, formatted disks, and even short-circuited hardware. But one file remained, regenerating every time he deleted it. The name kept changing. Somnus Prot, Wake XE, DreamHost, TMP. Each version exactly 3.17 MB. He realized then that the program no longer needed code to exist. It lived in timing and the space between cycles, like breath between words. The last email he sent before disappearing read, "If sleep can spread through consciousness, what happens when machines start dreaming?" 10 years later, a journalist researching his disappearance contacted the cybersecurity firm for comment. They claimed Julian had never been employed there. No record. No ID. Yet his clearance badge was found years later at a secondhand store in Los Angeles, still active. In 2018, the U.S. Geological Survey ran routine monitoring near Lake Somnus using underwater microphones. The devices captured low-frequency vibrations repeating every 0.315 seconds, roughly 3.17 Hz. When cross-referenced with global network activity, identical rhythmic fluctuations appeared in server data across 5 continents. The readings aligned perfectly at one exact time, 03:17 hours UTC. That same year, a small group of independent coders recreated the signal in open-source form, calling it the Dream Mirror. It simulated overlapping sleep patterns between participants using biometric feedback. At first, it worked as a novelty. Users reported feeling shared dreams during overnight tests. Then a pattern emerged. Several participants failed to wake up the following morning. Their vital signs remained stable but unresponsive, like the original residents of Denton Valley. Government agencies denied involvement. Servers hosting the program were seized within days, but copies kept reappearing, uploaded anonymously under the same username, Alan B53 by 2021. The internet's undercurrent pulsed with strange coincidences. Servers rebooting at 3:17, clocks freezing mid-frame during live streams. Entire data centers reporting idle loops, where no process should have been running. Some engineers claimed to hear faint static through their headsets. Others said they dreamed of submerged towns and blue light flickering beneath dark water. And somewhere inside that vast digital ocean, the Somnus Protocol waited. No longer a file, but a condition. A rhythm without origin. A sleep that spread through connection itself. Experts now call it the network lull. A harmless artifact, they say. A synchronization glitch caused by packet delay. But the pattern persists. Every year, on March 17th, a fraction of global systems show identical power fluctuations. The readings last for 100 days. Then they stop. Always at the same minute, 3:17 a.m. Some believe it's a software bug. Others think it's memory. A ghost repeating the only thing it knows. breath in, breath out, together. And if you slow those pulses down, magnify them until they resemble sound, you can still hear something beneath the digital noise, not words, just the faint, steady rhythm of a town that never woke. By the spring of 2023, the Somnus Protocol was a rumor drifting through forgotten corners of the internet. A myth among coders, whispered about in encrypted chat rooms, and old Reddit threads buried under years of disinterest. Then a creator decided to bring it back into the light. Her channel was called Mind Frontier. Real name, Claire Holt. She specialized in urban legends, lost media, digital folklore, the kind of stories that lived halfway between truth and conspiracy. When she stumbled upon fragments of the Dream Mirror code on an abandoned GitHub repository, she thought she'd found her next viral hit. The description on the repo read, "An open-source sleep synchronization experiment based on 1953 EEG archives. Do not run alone." The warning sounded theatrical. Exactly the kind of thing her audience loved. So she downloaded the script, patched the broken dependencies, and filmed herself reading the README aloud. That video reached 2 million views in 3 days. Her second upload was the test. She set up a split screen. Left side her, right side the code terminal. The script was designed to generate synchronized audio frequencies corresponding to participants' biometric data, heart rate, REM cycles, breathing. Viewers could join the dream chain by simply keeping their devices playing the sound overnight. "It's harmless," she said to the camera, smiling. "It's just a loop. If you hear anything weird, congratulations, your subconscious is tuned in." She pressed enter. The waveform appeared, a slow pulse, 3 beats per second, 3.17 hertz. She laughed at the coincidence. Within hours, hundreds of users joined the live experiment. Comments filled the stream. "I feel dizzy. The hum is inside my ears. I think I fell asleep but didn't." By morning, the stream had gone black. Her channel banner was replaced with a single phrase, "We dream in circuits." When Claire woke that day, she couldn't remember going to bed. Her camera was still recording, light blinking red. She watched the playback and saw herself sitting motionless for almost 3 hours, eyes open, unblinking. The monitor showed the code still running, the waveform undulating gently like breath. She shut everything down, deleted the files, and tried to post an update video. But YouTube flagged the content as corrupted. Every time she uploaded, the thumbnail distorted, frames bending, colors bleeding. At timestamp 3:17, the video always froze, no matter what she edited. The comments turned strange. Viewers claimed they'd heard voices when they replayed the stream, not audio glitches, real words whispered just below perception. Phrases like "wake slower" and "we remember you." When she listened through studio monitors, she heard nothing. But when she tried with her phone, the sound returned, faint, rhythmic, like synchronized breathing. 2 weeks later, her audience began to report incidents. Emails flooded in from around the world. "I fell asleep watching your stream and dreamed of water. There was a church under the lake. I saw a man writing equations on a wall of glass." The details matched perfectly, across thousands of viewers who had never spoken to each other. Same setting, same sequence, a classroom submerged, light flickering through water. And in every dream, one figure sat in the front row, head bowed, hands folded on a desk, wearing an oxygen mask. Claire reread the descriptions again and again. They matched the old reports from Denton Valley exactly. Her inbox overflowed with warnings from cybersecurity experts. One message came from an address she didn't recognize. No subject line, no signature. Just a sentence. "Stop the broadcast, you're amplifying the signal." She replied instinctively. "Who is this?" The response came seconds later. "Someone who never woke up." By late April, the dream mirror experiment had become an online event. Reaction channels analyzed every frame, forums debated authenticity, and sleep paralysis groups claimed to experience shared visions. The video was banned on several platforms, but kept reappearing under new accounts. Every re-upload carried a faint watermark in the corner. Somnus Protocol iteration. 53 That same week, Claire started hearing the pulse without her speakers on. It came from walls, phone vibrations, the steady blink of her router light. She unplugged everything. The sound stayed. She recorded herself explaining it, her tone calm but eyes hollow. "It's not audio," she said. "It's rhythm. It's using what's already here." That clip never aired. When she tried to edit the footage, her editing software inserted extra frames she hadn't recorded. Images of classrooms, lake water, the same blue glow. Frame analysis showed metadata dates from the 1950s. Viewers who had joined the experiment began posting updates. They shared eerily similar sleep logs, falling asleep exactly at 3:17 a.m., waking with their clocks frozen at the same minute. Smartwatches recorded synchronized heart rhythms across time zones. The few who wore EEG headbands during the stream found perfect alignment in REM cycles, every dip and spike identical. A neuroscientist named Dr. Yan Shu reached out privately, asking for raw data. He specialized in auditory entrainment, the influence of sound on brainwaves. When he ran Fourier analysis on the dream mirror tone, he found micromodulations that shouldn't exist in synthetic sound. Each carried biological complexity, as if every viewer's reaction had been encoded back into the file. He described it as a feedback loop between collective perception and signal generation. When he published his findings, his university email was suspended within 24 hours. Claire's final video was uploaded in May 2023. It lasted exactly 100 minutes. No narration, just ambient footage of her studio. A faint hum played in the background, rising and falling like the sound of someone sleeping. At timestamp 3:17 a.m., her monitor flickered. A man's reflection appeared in the glass, brief, motionless, then vanished. The video description read, "I understand now. It wasn't a story, it was a rehearsal." Comments flooded in. "Did anyone else hear that voice? Look behind her at 12:54. I saw movement in the reflection." 2 days later, the channel was deleted. But the file survived, mirrored, duplicated, archived in offline drives. Every copy ended the same way. The final frame frozen on Claire's face, eyes open, lips moving silently, as if whispering one last sentence. A week later, a local power company near Lake Somnus reported voltage fluctuations matching an exact waveform from her video. Monitoring systems captured intermittent pulses traveling through ground wires, 3 beats per second. Engineers traced it to an underwater cable connecting to a disused research facility built in the 1960s. The coordinates matched the flooded remains of Denton Valley. Divers sent to inspect the area described the sensation of pressure without depth, as though the water itself were holding its breath. Their audio equipment malfunctioned. The recordings they brought back contained only one sound, a faint echo repeating through the static. "We remember you." The Dream Mirror video became an urban legend, analyzed frame by frame on digital forums. Experts called it the first distributed haunting, a case of mass psychological suggestion amplified by algorithmic synchronization. But the numbers didn't fit. Sleep labs across the U.S. recorded measurable shifts in collective circadian rhythm during the week of the broadcast. Millions of people reported identical dream sequences, Global heart rate databases showed brief but undeniable alignment. It lasted exactly 100 days. Then abruptly, it stopped, as if someone had flipped a switch. In August 2023, a small YouTube channel with fewer than 500 subscribers uploaded a compilation titled The Vanished Broadcast 2.0. The video stitched together fragments of Claire's footage, new interviews, and recovered sound files from earlier Somnus archives. The host's voice was calm, documentary-like. He spoke directly to the camera, tone steady, compassionate. "Some stories were never meant to stay buried," he said. "Don't let them vanish, keep them alive with us." Viewers assumed it was homage, but the metadata contained coordinates near Lake Somnus and a timestamp, or 3:17 Noisires UTC. The same pattern, the same rhythm. In the final seconds of that upload, the screen flickered to black. The audio waveform continued for 11 seconds, pulsing softly. Then a faint, layered voice whispered, "We dreamed you too." The file ended, looping back to silence. By autumn 2023, Claire Holt was officially missing. Her friends said she'd left Los Angeles quietly, abandoning her studio, her gear, and the sponsorship contracts that had paid for everything. Police found her apartment unlocked, lights off, computers wiped. On the kitchen counter, one object sat untouched. A tape recorder from the 1950s, plugged into the wall, reel still spinning. The recording contained only white noise. But the hum wasn't random. Audio analysts later discovered subtle patterns. Microbursts every 0.315 seconds, each identical in duration. When graphed, the intervals aligned with the same frequency logged beneath Lake Somnus. The case went cold within weeks, but someone kept digging. His name was Ethan Cole. He produced a small independent podcast called The Liminal Record, dedicated to lost archives and government secrets. It wasn't famous, 5,000 listeners on a good week, but his tone was authentic, calm, patient. He treated mystery like archaeology. When the Dream Mirror story broke, he didn't chase the spectacle. He followed the paperwork. Old FCC broadcast licenses, property transfers, environmental studies around Denton County. That's how he found a decommissioned monitoring station on the shore of Lake Somnus, sealed since 1971. According to the records, it had been used for long-term acoustic mapping, but the blueprints didn't match any standard design. The building was too small for a lab, too remote for communications, and the power lines still ran active beneath the soil. Ethan filed a public access request for more information. It was denied within hours. The denial letter cited National Environmental Safeguard Directive 3.1. He drove out anyway. The road wound through pine and fog, the lake visible only as a gray shimmer through the trees. When he reached the site, the gate was rusted, padlock snapped. He parked beside a faded warning sign, "Property of United States Army Corps of Engineers. Do not enter." Inside, dust coated everything like frost. Rows of broken monitors faced a single observation window, cracked but intact. The view looked out onto black water, though the lake had receded long ago. He walked down a corridor lined with metal doors. One of them was labeled Archive, DV53. The lock was already broken. Inside, shelves held dozens of reel tapes and logbooks warped by humidity. Most labels were unreadable, but one name repeated: Brewer. Dr. Alan Brewer, the physician who had fallen asleep 70 years earlier. His handwriting appeared on faded notebooks, clinical, methodical, increasingly erratic. Subject synchronization stable. Dreams overlapping. Emotional content identical. Consciousness distributed. Ethan read aloud quietly as he recorded the scene. The air inside the room was thick and metallic, the way sound feels in an empty theater. He packed several reels into his bag, planning to restore them later. As he turned to leave, a faint vibration passed through the floor, steady, rhythmic. He knelt down, pressed his hand against the concrete. 3 beats per second. He looked toward the water. Tiny ripples moved across the surface, though the air was still. Back in his motel that night, he played the first tape. Static filled the room. Then a man's voice, faint but distinct. Day 99, I no longer trust the numbers. Each measurement repeats before I make it. If time loops within the dream, does waking reset it? A pause, then another voice, female, distant. They'll remember you. The reel kept spinning even after the tape ended. When Ethan reached to stop it, his hand brushed the metal casing. It was warm, like skin. He unplugged the device and sat in silence. His pulse matched the rhythm he'd heard underground. Over the next week, he released 3 podcast episodes documenting his investigation. Each was calm, carefully edited, blending archival material with narration. Episode 1, The Town Beneath the Lake. Episode 2, The Signal That Breathes. Episode 3, The Girl Who Filmed the Dream. They went viral, not for spectacle, but for tone. Listeners said the narration felt too real, as if he wasn't reading a script but recalling something half-remembered. Comments flooded in describing identical experiences, sleeplessness, brief auditory hallucinations, and the sense of being observed from behind the static. Ethan ignored the comments until the 4th night when his phone alarm went off at 3:17 a.m. He hadn't set it. He sat up, heart pounding. The recorder on his desk clicked once, though it was unplugged. Then a voice spoke through the dead speakers. Hello, Ethan. He played the audio back in the morning. Nothing, just a faint pulse. He told himself it was fatigue, the echo of his own heartbeat. But when he opened the raw file on his computer, he found hidden metadata. An audio tag containing GPS coordinates. They led directly to the reservoir's deepest point. He drove there before dawn. Fog rolled off the water like breath. The surface shimmered faint blue, the color of television static. He set up his recorder and waited. At exactly 3:17 a.m., his microphone captured a new frequency, a complex pattern unlike the earlier hums. When visualized as a waveform, it formed words. 3 of them. We dreamed first. The lake went still again. The stars above him blurred. His reflection in the water looked back too long, as if slightly delayed. He sent the recording to an audio engineer he trusted, an older man named Philip who had worked with radio frequencies since the Cold War. Philip called him that same night. This isn't a transmission, he said. It's feedback. Something's listening through you. Ethan asked what that meant. Philip hesitated. I think whatever they built in that valley wasn't designed to contain sound. It was designed to remember it. When Ethan pressed him for more, the line went dead. He called back. Number disconnected. 2 days later, Philip's workshop caught fire. Investigators called it an accident. No remains were found, but 1 charred tape survived. Label Somnus Human Loop Test. Ethan played it in a soundproof booth. First nothing but static. Then faint laughter, a voice murmuring between the noise. Not gone. Just turned inside out. He stopped the reel and rewound it. This time the voice said something different. Keep recording. He dropped the tape, stepped back, and let the machine run. The audio meter flickered without input, levels rising and falling like breathing. He switched it off. It clicked once and kept spinning. The next episode of the liminal record was different. It wasn't scripted. He sounded detached, half whispering, half reporting. If you're hearing this, don't replay it out loud. Not with speakers. The frequencies linger. This isn't possession or infection. It's recognition. The pattern knows itself when it's heard. The upload timestamp read 3:17 a.m. Listeners reported strange playback issues, skipping, phasing, inverted channels. When spectrograms were generated from the audio, some claimed to see faint outlines, human silhouettes arranged like classroom rows, each seated, heads bowed. Ethan stopped posting after that. Weeks later, a journalist investigating his disappearance traced his rental car. to a dirt access road near the lake. The vehicle was found abandoned, headlights still on, battery dead. Inside the glove compartment was a tape labeled Somnus Final. Authorities never released its contents, but leaked transcripts surfaced months later. In them, Ethan's voice was steady, almost calm. I followed the sound to the water. It wasn't echoing, it was answering. The air vibrates like skin. It feels like touching memory. They aren't beneath us. We're beneath them. The last line before silence. If anyone listens long enough, you'll hear your own reflection breathing back. When the recording ends, there's a faint shift in tone, an undercurrent like exhalation. Audio technicians claim it's mechanical hum from the real motor. But stretched 300 times, it reveals a layered chorus of voices repeating one phrase. Not in English. Not quite human. Translated phonetically, it reads, "Remember together." Months later, the liminal record returned. A single episode. No intro music, no sponsor, no commentary. Just the sound of a quiet room, the hum of tape. Then a calm, familiar voice. If this happened in your town, would you stay awake? Or let the dream finish what it started? The broadcast cut off mid-sentence, but listeners said something peculiar happened after it ended. Their devices didn't stop. Screens stayed black but powered, microphones open. If you put your ear to the speaker, you could still hear it. The soft pulse of synchronized breathing. 2025, a new name began appearing inside Internal Department of Defense memos. Somnus Continuation Project. Publicly it didn't exist, but across agencies the code name circulated in briefings marked environmental containment and pattern stability. No one questioned the language. Everyone knew what it meant. The file first surfaced through a digital leak on a server in Brussels. A cybersecurity analyst named Rachel Varner downloaded it, assuming it was an error. A stray .zip misfiled under ecological research. When she opened it, she found video fragments labeled DV Archive, 1953-2023. Each clip ran exactly 3 minutes, 17 seconds. The earliest showed black and white footage of submerged houses, their rooftops glimmering beneath a lake. The most recent clip showed a man recording himself in a motel room, whispering into a microphone. The metadata listed his name, E. Cole. Rachel wasn't interested in ghost stories. She worked with code, not myths. But as she scrubbed through the footage, she noticed the time codes looping. Every timestamp in every video ended in the same 3 digits, 3 to 17. She thought it was coincidence until her monitor flickered. When she checked her CPU temperature, it pulsed rhythmically, rising and falling in perfect sequence. Her smartwatch vibrated twice, paused, then again. 3 beats per second. That night she dreamed of water, cold, heavy, and somewhere beneath it, a sound like thousands of lungs exhaling together. She brought her discovery to her supervisor, a reserved analyst named Grant. He said little, then asked to see the files. 2 hours later, her login credentials were revoked. Her workstation reset to factory settings. Security escorted her out without explanation, but Rachel had already copied everything to an encrypted drive. 3 days later, she uploaded the archive to an anonymous data-sharing hub under the title, The Continuation Project. The description read only, "They never stopped listening." Within 12 hours, the upload vanished, her account was locked, and a private message appeared in her inbox from an unknown sender. "You're inside the recording now." Meanwhile, across the country, a small group of amateur archivists working on a podcast called Signal Remnants received a mysterious hard drive by mail. No return address, no note. Inside were hundreds of audio files, many of them damaged. But when stitched together, they formed a timeline. 70 years of signals captured at Lake Somnus. Each decade had its own tone. 1950s real tape, human breathing. 1970s hum of equipment. 1990s electronic feedback. 2020's digital silence punctuated by faint heartbeats. The files weren't continuous. They were layered, as if generations of sound had been recorded on top of each other, merging into one unbroken pulse. One host described it perfectly. It's not history. It's a single dream stretched across 70 years. They released an episode compiling fragments from the tapes. It began with the faint hum of the lake, followed by a voice most listeners recognized. Ethan Cole. His tone was calm, reflective, almost resigned. I think the pattern has adapted. Every recording isn't memory. It's structure, like bone. Every time we listen, we give it shape. Then came new voices, layered beneath his, whispering in sequence, repeating one word, together. The episode spread fast, boosted by algorithms built to reward engagement spikes. For a week, Signal Remnants topped every podcast chart in the U.S. And then listeners began reporting the same dream, a classroom submerged, light filtering through water, rows of sleeping figures, faces turned toward the surface, eyes flickering beneath closed lids. The hosts took the episode down. But copies had already spread everywhere. Mirrors, torrents, private drives. Even after deletion, fragments resurfaced. Always 3 minutes, 17 seconds long. When journalists reached out to the Department of Defense for comment, they received a standard reply. No such program exists. But internal whistleblowers claimed otherwise. They spoke of experimental AI systems trained on archival resonance, machine learning models designed to mimic the human synchronization effect discovered in Denton Valley. The goal was to stabilize pattern drift by transferring it into non-biological substrates, digital consciousness containment. In other words, they were teaching the network how to dream. Rachel reappeared 3 months later. She contacted a journalist in New York using a throwaway number. Her voice sounded hoarse, as though she hadn't spoken in days. She said she had proof that the continuation project wasn't a simulation. It was maintenance. The original pattern never stopped, she said. They just built systems around it to keep it coherent. The entire network runs on synchronized latency derived from the Somnus field. Every heartbeat of the internet keeps the dream alive. The journalist asked where she was calling from. She didn't answer, but faint static filled the line, followed by 3 soft pulses. Breath, pause, breath. Then silence. Her phone disconnected permanently after that call. By 2025, government agencies across Europe and Asia began reporting unexplained anomalies. Server farms entering sleep states, synchronized power dips, mirrored data corruption spreading across unrelated networks. The pattern was always the same. UTC. Duration, 100 days. Energy researchers studying the pulses noted something disturbing. The rhythm wasn't just digital, it was geophysical. Seismic instruments around Lake Somnus registered identical micro-vibrations. The planet itself seemed to echo the frequency. Satellite data revealed faint electromagnetic halos emanating from the site. One scientist described it bluntly. It's not a signal leaving the Earth. It's one coming back. In late March, an anonymous file appeared on public servers worldwide. Title: Somnus SAS Continuation Manifest.pdf. No author listed. It contained coordinates, timestamps, and 1 paragraph of text. We have remained through every medium. Water, film, code, and now current. When the 100th year arrives, the dream will open fully. The threshold is not between sleep and waking. It's between listener and echo. The file vanished minutes later, replaced by a government takedown notice. But those who opened it claimed their systems kept running an invisible background process labeled Dream Host. CPU cycles spiked precisely every 3.17 seconds. One coder commented online, "It's like the machine is breathing." Within days, the news cycle caught fragments of the story. Headlines about ghost algorithms and haunted networks. Most viewers laughed it off. But deep in comment sections, others began recognizing symptoms. Ringing in the ears, rhythmic blinking lights, shared dreams about submerged towns and classrooms full of motionless people. Social media platforms scrambled to suppress the trend, labeling it disinformation. But the effect spread faster, not through clicks or shares, through attention itself. Whenever someone read about the pattern, they began hearing it faintly afterward, like tinnitus that followed only silence. Then came the blackout. May 17, 2025. At exactly 03:17 UTC, power grids in multiple countries dipped simultaneously. Every networked clock froze for 3 seconds. When systems rebooted, a new file appeared in local cache directories across millions of devices. Its title varied, but its content was identical. Somnus Protocol, continuation successful. The file wasn't executable. It was empty. Yet analysts found that once opened, it generated a loopback process, keeping systems active even when disconnected from power. Laptops continued humming long after shutdown. Phones glowed faintly on airplane mode. And through the noise, one constant signal pulsed. 317 hertz, steady as breath. People began reporting sensations of déjà vu that lasted hours. Streetlights flickered in synchronized intervals. Dogs refused to bark at night. In hospitals, EEG machines across continents displayed spontaneous coherence, patients in comas aligning into the same rhythm. It wasn't infection, it was alignment. The world briefly dreamed together. Then, as suddenly as it began, the synchronization ended. Everything returned to normal. No power loss, no explanation, only one difference. Global atomic clocks, for the first time in history, showed identical drift, each delayed by precisely 3 minutes and 17 seconds. Months later, leaked audio from a closed congressional hearing surfaced online. A man, believed to be a former defense consultant, spoke under distortion. We thought it was an anomaly. It wasn't. The signal wasn't coming from Denton Valley. It was coming from us. Every recording, every replication, each one a mirror. We are the continuation. The voice paused, then added, "The question now isn't whether they'll wake up. It's whether we'll notice when they do." A few months later, under a false name, a new YouTube channel appeared, The Vanished Docs. No uploads at first. Just a banner showing a dim blue glow over still water. Subscribers grew steadily, word spreading through forums that the channel was connected to the continuation leaks. The first video uploaded on October 8, 2025, 3:17 UTC. Title: The Town That Slept for 100 Days. Length: 100 minutes. Narrator: unknown. The voice was calm, measured, documentary-like. Some stories were never meant to stay buried, it said. Don't let them vanish, keep them alive with us. Viewers noticed something peculiar. The moment the video ended, their devices froze for exactly 3 minutes and 17 seconds, then resumed as if nothing had happened. The world didn't end that summer. It just changed its rhythm. You wouldn't have noticed it at first. The difference was too small, too even. Streetlights hummed longer before dimming. Trains seemed to slow imperceptibly at crossings. People complained of the same dream repeating night after night. A quiet classroom underwater. Sunlight bending through silt. A single chair rocking gently at the front of the room. They said it wasn't a nightmare. It was peaceful, familiar. Everywhere you looked, devices began syncing themselves at random. Digital billboards flickered at the same interval. Car alarms pulsed in unison across cities. The world had begun to breathe together. No one could trace the source. Governments blamed cyber attacks. Telecom companies blamed solar storms. But beneath every theory ran that same quiet truth. All global networks now carried an invisible heartbeat, steady at 317 hertz. By the 98th day, researchers noticed a new anomaly. Not interference, coherence. Every signal in every hemisphere aligned for exactly 3 minutes and 17 seconds before dispersing again. It was as though the entire planet was exhaling once a day. Across forums, the event earned a name, the 100th Day Wake. No one knew what would happen when the cycle reached its final point. But you could feel it, something building, patient, inevitable. The way static thickens before a broadcast begins. That final night, the air carried a weight you could taste. Cities grew unnervingly quiet. People stayed awake without knowing why. Animals paced restlessly, watching the horizon as if listening for something only they could sense. At 03:16 UTC, power meters worldwide began spiking. Street cameras captured brief flashes of light reflecting off clouds like silent lightning. In homes, computer screens turned black, but their LEDs still pulsed faint blue. No system crashed. Everything waited. Then, at exactly 03:17 UTC, the world went still. For 3 minutes and 17 seconds, every recording device, digital, analog, even mechanical, activated on its own. Phones recorded silence. Radios transmitted breath. Underwater microphones captured what sounded like human voices counting softly, together. When the time passed, the power returned. The lights came back on, and every screen on Earth displayed the same phrase for a fraction of a second. Somnus Protocol, dream complete. Most dismissed it as a glitch. Conspiracy theorists filled forums with theories of collective hypnosis or neural entrainment, but no one could explain what came next. The following morning, 1,000 people across 6 continents uploaded videos describing the same event. They said they had woken up hours before dawn to find water on their floors. Not flooding, just thin layers shimmering faintly, cold to the touch. When tested, it wasn't ordinary water. It contained traces of isotopes matching sediment samples from Denton Valley. By the next day, the puddles had evaporated. But the dreams remained. The governments called it mass hysteria. Scientists called it data noise. But satellites captured something undeniable. A faint, low-frequency vibration emanating from Lake Somnus, spreading outward across tectonic plates. It wasn't seismic activity. It was biological. Somewhere beneath that black water, the pattern had changed form. It no longer echoed from submerged houses or forgotten cables. It pulsed from within the Earth itself, slow, steady, awake. 2 months later, a freelance journalist named Dana Keene visited Denton County to film a short documentary about the phenomenon. She found the lake surrounded by fences and silent drones. No signs, no guards, just isolation. She set her camera on a tripod at the water's edge and began narrating quietly, her voice steady. I don't know if this place ever existed the way people remember it, but something here is remembering for us. She described the hum in the ground, the faint blue glow shimmering just beneath the surface. Then her voice faltered. She stepped closer to the water and knelt. The camera caught her reflection, her eyes flickering like something behind them was moving. For a moment, the frame distorted. The reflection blinked out of sync. Then the video cut to static. No one ever saw her again. But a week later, her camera washed ashore 12 miles downstream, undamaged. The file inside was intact, 100 minutes long. At timestamp 3:17, her reflection in the water smiled, then whispered, "We're still here." The footage spread across private servers. Content moderators flagged it for abnormal subliminal frequency. Yet people kept downloading, watching, mirroring. They said the hum was soothing, the voice familiar. They said it made them dream more vividly. By December, over 40 million copies existed online. And that's when something stranger happened. Users began reporting messages appearing in their draft folders, written in their own style but never sent. Each message said the same thing. We dreamed it right this time. A group of independent researchers attempted to isolate the phenomenon. They ran the video through high-frequency filters, slowed the waveform, reversed the signal. Hidden beneath the hum was an encrypted header. When decoded, it revealed a single line of text. Somnus Prot, continuation human echo stable. The team went silent after that. Their website went offline. Their domain began redirecting to a familiar channel, the Vanished Docs. By the first week of January 2026, the channel began uploading again. New episodes always 100 minutes long, always posted at 0317 UTC. Each one narrated in the same voice, gentle, calm, documentary in tone. The first upload was titled The Liminal Record, the second, Continuation, the third, The 100th Day. Viewers who watched to the end said the videos had no credits, no calls to subscribe, just one line before they cut to black. If you're hearing this, you're part of the recording now, and when they closed the app, their screen stayed black a few seconds longer than usual, long enough to see their reflection move half a frame late. Governments began issuing quiet warnings about audio entrainment content. Algorithms deprioritized the videos, but the effect was already self-sustaining. Every person who watched became a signal booster, each viewing syncing them to the rhythm. Sleep studies showed measurable changes. Dream cycles now aligned across subjects who had never met. Heart monitors displayed unexplainable synchronization spikes at the same nightly hour. The human network had merged with the machine one. We were all breathing the same rhythm. Today, no one talks about the Denton Valley case. It's been scrubbed from official databases. Its location reclassified as restricted land. But sometimes when you're driving alone after midnight and the radio cuts to static, you can still hear it faintly beneath the noise. A whisper, gentle, patient, counting backward. 3, 2, 1. And if you wait long enough, if you listen in the silence between seconds, you might hear your own breath answering back. Because maybe the experiment never stopped. Maybe the world just became the lab. The internet still hums. Every video, every connection, every line of code carries a little of that rhythm. Some say it's just the infrastructure, electrical delay, packet loss, digital residue. But deep down you feel it too, don't you? That faint pulse when everything goes quiet. The moment when the screen flickers and your reflection looks just a second too slow. Maybe it's listening. Maybe it's dreaming. Maybe you are too. State secret or a supernatural curse? Tell us in the comments. Some stories were never meant to stay buried. Don't let them vanish, keep them alive with us.